Today, answers matter more than ever before. That's why IBM is helping businesses manage customer questions with Watson Assistant. It's conversational AI designed to work for any industry. Let's put smart to work. Visit IBM.com/Watson Assistant.
The Future Sport Podcast is brought to you by 3Advance, developers of sports tech apps that are AI-powered and UX-focused. So if you're looking to create some apps for your startup or your sports biz calls for some artificial or business intelligence, you should check out 3Advance. They're incredible. Go to 3advance.com. That's the number 3advance.com.
Empire.
The data wins every time. Ask a former 49er.
Now, think of Bill Walsh now. He's a genius, right? He was doing analytics before analytics was even talked about. You know, what he used to do the 9mm film. He used to have his coaches cut and splice tapes, the video.
That's 49ers legend Roger Craig, who is now part of the business development team at Tibco, a group leading the revolution of information to make those outcomes more predictable. This is the Future Sport Podcast. I'm Bram Weinstein. Roger Craig and the Chief Analytic Officer Michael O'Connell will be here to talk about the recent past, a Niners loss, they'll lament that, and the future where their analytics can help in the prediction game. Also, we're going to hear from one of the longtime sports writers who thinks sometimes the tech has gone too far in sports, and we'll let you decide. Does he have a point? Or is this the old walking both ways to school uphill in the snow with no shoes on argument? But first, the future is now. All this new technology, it's supposed to make performance better, right? Not always. Laine Higgins from the Wall Street Journal joins us. She wrote a piece recently about Nike's smart basketball, and it may have caused a drop in shooting percentages for Mountain West Conference players. Hey, Laine, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me on.
Why is this backfiring? What's going on?
So it's been a little bit curious because when the Mountain West Conference started using these new basketballs that are embedded with a sensor that is made by a company called Shot Tracker, and only, I guess it's a bit of a roundabout way of saying this, but essentially when the team started playing with these smart balls that were manufactured by Nike, their shooting percentages dropped off. And when they started playing with the smart balls manufactured by any other company like Under Armour or Wilson, there was no change. So that led a lot of these players to kind of grumble about the balls, and some of the San Diego State players who, until last weekend were the last undefeated team in the country, were, outright saying the ball was horrible. And they say it's slippery, it's hard to grip, and, in a sport like basketball where shooting can have a large mental component and, missing a few shots can derail the progress of a game, this had a pretty sizable impact on results.
So is this, in your determination, more about the feel of the ball and less about the technology that is supplying the information back to the players and the coaches?
It appears to be so, and there's about 60 schools in Division I that use these Shot Tracker basketballs in practice. Only the Mountain West schools are allowed to use them in games, and they got a special waiver from the NCAA to do that. Reason being, they want to have an even playing field, so they don't want a school being able to see this data in real time on the bench while their rival isn't. And when the Mountain West schools started practicing with the balls, that happened at the beginning of this year, but they weren't playing their games with these Shot Tracker balls. They were playing with an older version of the Nike ball for the 7 schools that are sponsored by Nike. And then when those schools started playing their conference games, then they switched from the older model of Nike ball to the newer model that had the sensor in it. And that's when the shooting drop-off really occurred. And, there was no such difference between the non-conference and conference shooting for the Wilson-sponsored teams and the Under Armour-sponsored team, Colorado State. So that sort of indicates that it maybe has less to do with putting in the sensor, if putting in the sensor in those other brands of basketballs didn't have an effect, and more having to do with, what the Nike ball, whatever changes were made.
What is the conference saying about this? Clearly, they want to collect this data. So, what are they saying? Are they saying, okay, we'll back off because the ball isn't liked by the players? What's their response to all of this?
Well, the conference has a deal with Nike and Shot Tracker, so they're going to use these balls in the conference tournament. And in theory, it should be a level playing field because everyone is using it. It's not as if, one team is the ball switches to brands based on possession. And at this point, the drop-off that occurred in shooting was statistically significant during the month of December and early January. But as time has gone out, teams look like they've kind of adjusted, and the shooting is pretty much back to where it was in the non-conference slate of the season. So it's possible that, at this point, it really doesn't matter that they're using the ball. They've kind of figured it out. And, if you give a baseball player a new bat, it's going to take them some time to adjust. So it's probably something along those lines. And the Mountain West Conference, is supportive of these balls in this deal. So I don't think that they're going to back down.
The interesting part of all of that is with all this new technology, listen, it's billed as almost coaching in real time. It's data to help performance. Most of the teams and leagues that we've talked to, they're all very bullish about what this means for them moving forward. But the feel of the ball, that's something that didn't have to be altered, right? I mean, that's the most interesting part of the whole thing is why would any of that get changed if that's what the players were accustomed to, and what's on the inside is what matters here.
Exactly, and that's something that Nike wouldn't comment on. In the reporting for the story, I asked them if there was any sort of changes made to the manufacturing or to the leather, or to how deep the grooves are between the little swatches of leather on the basketball, and they declined to say anything. So it's unclear kind of what changed or what any sort of rationale was behind that.
Maybe they'll get that part fixed. That seems of all the technological advances, that's the one I think they could easily go back to and fix.
One would think.
Yeah, one would
supply
think.
Chain is a whole other animal that I won't even pretend that I understand the inner workings of.
Neither will I. Neither will I. Laine Higgins from the Wall Street Journal. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Up next, legendary 49ers running back Roger Craig and his partner Michael O'Connell introducing you to the data offerings at Tibco. This is the Future Sport Podcast. Our guest this week is Roger Craig, who's the Director of Business Development, and Michael O'Connell, who's the Chief Analytics Officer at Tibco, and they are shaking things up in the analytics and AI world. And you may recognize the name Roger Craig. We'll get into his background in a moment, but first, thank you both for being here today.
My pleasure.
Absolutely.
Let me just get this out of the way. Roger, as everyone probably recognizes, you're a former very famous San Francisco 49er, so sorry about the Super Bowl.
Oh, I know. Super Bowl is so bad. I mean, our guys play so well. They're so young. And, analytic-wise, we had the numbers to win the Super Bowl, But, things happen, and, I'm not going to, criticize the referees or anything like that. But, our guys, they'll be back. They're young, and they got the right culture there. And I think that, they have the right leaders with Shanahan and Lynch. And, you got guys like that won Super Bowls before. His father won 3 Super Bowls, Shanahan, and Lynch won a Super Bowl with Tampa Bay. So they understand the culture of what it takes to go to that next level. And with analytics and things behind them, they're going to even have more success understanding that.
I think the talent of the defensive line will help them too. Those guys are amazing.
Absolutely. Bosa,
yeah,
he is the man. I love that guy.
Yeah.
I had the opportunity to visit with him, and I tell him he starves like he's hungry. He's not hungry. He's starving. There's a difference between hungry and starving. When you're hungry, you get 3 meals a day. When you're starving, you'll know when you get your meal. That's how he was. He was like a big lion out there, just starving to get some food, man.
Yeah,
sacks and things.
Yeah, heading towards best defensive player in the league, and they took on maybe the best quarterback in the league. It was a hell of a game. Let's get into what you guys do at Tibco. Michael, why don't we start with you? What's your purpose? What do you guys do?
Well, as Chief Analytics Officer, I oversee our data science, visual analytics, data management products from the field perspective, and talk to customers, and keep our products relevant. But as it comes to sports analytics, well, certainly we did a lot over the past year with the NFL. And to your point there, our defense in terms of passing yards allowed was lowest in the league, and some of the analyses we did around looking at those data and looking across different plays and different games and the way the defense worked was pretty interesting. We had the Niners predicted to win the thing, and apart from that last 6 minutes, I think we could have pulled it off. But we're seeing a lot in the football area of analytics coming to the fore. We're seeing things like next gen stats shown on the screen right there. Quarterback separation, receiver separation, catch probability, things like that. That's interesting. I follow New Age Analytical Ben Baldwin Twitter feed, and looking at a bunch of different stats, not just for game stats in the NFL, but also recruiting. Recruiting something I used to work on. The former owner of Tibco had an interest in the Golden State Warriors and now the Sacramento Kings. And we used to look at the new draft of players coming up, the college stats, look at the current players, their previous college stats, and then do a mapping exercise to kind of predict with someone's college record, what trajectory they might have, in the NBA. In that case, we're also looking at doing that this year in the NFL. But we've done things like Roger mentioned the fantasy football. We get involved in that. Also for different teams, we've done things like just cross-sell business analytics, looking at merchandise sales and ticket sales, and trying to cross-sell the customers for both of those products. So it's we have a commercial angle on it as well as looking at the actual game stats. And I mentioned some of the work we're doing with the NCAA March Madness thing coming up. We're also the brains behind the Mercedes F1 team that won the last few drivers' championships and car constructor championships. So it certainly is an interest of ours, especially Roger being on staff. Sports analytics, in addition to all the other things we do for our regular Fortune 500 customers, is a passion and interest for us.
The NFL draft, we went 4 years back of when what kind of player you want to look for, whatever, who's going to be the top guy. We went 4 years back of college, and then when it came around time your senior year, you'll know what player progressed and took it to the next level, and so you have better chances of getting guys that are quality players, and so that we helped doing that too as well.
How do you collect the data then when you're trying to project out a collegiate player or someone in a minor league, and you're trying to project out 4 teams what their career trajectory could be, obviously barring injury? How do you collect that data and make that model?
Yeah, so there's a lot of data out there. You'd be surprised, like, in terms of football, for example, Football DB, Football Outsiders, Pro Football Reference. We were using recently this Kaggle data set, which had basically every NFL player in it since going back to the 40s. We did an analysis in support of Rogers Hall of Fame application, which I can show you a pretty interesting analysis. But there's data out there everywhere. When I mentioned the last couple of years we've been in the top 1% of the NCAA March Madness. We get the Ken Pomeroy data as well as the Jeff Sagarin data, along with ESPN, Sonny Moore, and we kind of pull together data from multiple sources, and also a little bit sort of like Nate Silver. We're also looking to experts like Ken Pomeroy's take on things. But in that case, the NCAA March Madness, one of the interesting things we did there was we had a model for the win-loss progression, but we also had a separate machine learning model for Cinderellas. And if you can pick a couple of Cinderellas that advance, beyond their seed, that can be a real differentiator compared to the rest of the pack. But yeah, we're kind of proud of getting in the top 1% of the ESPN data set for the last 2 years in a row, and we've got some events coming up. We're going to kick it off, I think, with James Worthy at an event in Las Vegas, the March Madness kickoff, and we're going to take that to a few cities that first week of the NCAA this year.
So where does that information go? Are you trying to pitch this to customers who are looking for an edge in picking fantasy players or potentially gambling? How do you disseminate this and monetize all this data and information that you have?
That's a great question. So, yeah, we're using it to just get the public interest around our products. And so I can send you some links of Spotfire. Our visual analytics product is called Spotfire, spot the fire in the data. And we put up a bunch of demonstrations in that software, using public interest data like sports data to get more eyeballs on Spotfire, essentially. So, yeah, the March Madness thing, I think we kicked off the invitations to those events this past week. And, a single email gets, hundreds of people signing up to see what's going on. And so it's more of a, building the brand of Tibco and Spotfire that we're using the sports analytics for. There's not a huge amount of revenue there for us compared to all the, corporate accounts we have like, FedEx and Citi and all the rest. But, there's a lot of interest, a lot of eyeballs in sports analytics.
Roger, what got you into this, into the analytic field?
Well, it's part of our platform at Tibco. I've been here for 20 years, so it's part of what we do, and I enjoyed it, and I enjoy working with our group when we had the fantasy football. That was huge. 9 out of 10% people who listened to me and basically took my lead. They did very well because our analytics was so impressive, and with the Warriors, they used our analytics for 3-point shots. People who shoot the ball in certain areas a certain amount of times. We knew exactly, they knew exactly how to defend these teams. We did this early on when Vivek Ranadive was the CEO of our company. So we've done a lot of work with sports, and I love it. Michael O'Connell is the man, and I enjoy working with him.
It's so interesting, Roger, because all this stuff, I can only imagine when you were playing that this didn't exist. So I wonder if you kind of...
Let me tell you something. Bill Walsh, now think of Bill Walsh now. He's a genius, right? He was doing analytics before analytics was even talked about. What he used to do the 9mm film. He used to have his coaches cut and splice tapes, the video, what defense, what teams that we had to play against, what defense they're going to be in. And they would do this whole off season, and then he would know exactly what defense they're going to be in. We had the first 25 plays. He would draw those first 25 plays up, and we wouldn't deviate from those first 25 plays. We would stick to those plays. He knew exactly what defense they're going to be in. And he created that. Bill Walsh did this, man. It's unbelievable. It's so unbelievable. And we had our first 25 plays, and a lot of times I'm like, how many times I'm going to run the ball? We didn't run the ball a lot. We threw passes on that first 25 plays, but he would never deviate from those plays. He knew exactly what defense they were going to be in. That's impressive, to do that back in the 80s. It was so amazing.
The interesting thing there from my perspective in working with Roger on looking back on his career and seeing the versatility of the running game and receiving at the 49ers, how Roger did that first 1,000+ season of receiving and rushing. But you see that kind of make its way even this past year down to the 49ers offense. You see these guys like Mostert and Coleman and Jerzik and these guys. Yeah. One minute they're blocking, the next minute they're catching, rushing. It's like the team that's lining up against them, they don't quite know on a particular play what Jersey's going to do from the fullback position, or what Ostler or Coleman are going to do. And you saw that in spades against Green Bay, and particularly,
yeah.
but almost in the final too, almost in the Super Bowl. There were touches of that brilliance of the running and receiving guys were just like all over the place in versatility, and Roger and Bill Walsh pioneered that, and you still see it in the 49ers offense this past season, right?
Unbelievable. You're so right, Michael, because when we played against Green Bay, they thought for sure that Jimmy G was going to throw a lot of passes, and their defenses were geared to stop our passing. But guess what? Moser had a game of his life. He ran for 200-something yards against them, and they kept putting their defense in his passing, kind of, defense. But we didn't throw the ball. But how many times? Six or seven times. So the president of the 49ers, his name is Prague, he was hired to come to the 49ers back when Bill Walsh was alive to do all the analytics for the 49ers. Now he's the president and so he understands analytics as well. So I'm pretty sure that he did some work too.
Hey, Michael. So you had mentioned here that this is kind of just part of the business of Tibco. You have a lot of data analytics that are going in things that are outside of the sports realm. What ultimately is the company's goal with providing all of this type of information in the sports world?
We see the general interest in sports analytics really growing, across the board. I mean, you see that conference that's going on in Boston this week, next week, I guess, the Sloan Conference. It's sold out. I mean, there really is a lot of interest in it. So we're applying our machine learning, visual analytics, data management software, into sports analytics to just, get people aware of our products. Now, typically, these products like SpotBar, for example, when it's deployed at scale in an enterprise, 50,000, 100,000 users of that software in a single organization, it's very common to have 10, 20, 30,000 users, for example. So you've got a big catchment area of a product like that. And so, people get excited about sports in the United States and around the world. So just getting eyeballs and awareness of our products, we feel like the sports analytics area is a great area for us. We successfully predicted the Cricket World Cup. So for our, folks in the UK and India and so on, that got some attention. So it's like, the Tibco products, great. We're a great technology company, and they really have a lot of strength for managing, analyzing, spotting the fire, building out data science models. But we're kind of a secret. Now we're a big company, but not that big. And so, competing against the likes of IBM and Amazon and Oracle and all these guys, we don't have the awareness. And so we're trying to use the sports analytics to get broader awareness of our products. That's really the angle that we're taking with it at the moment.
Michael O'Connell is the Chief Analytics Officer, and Roger Craig, famous San Francisco 49ers, been with the company for 20 years as their Director of Business Development. It's great having you both here today. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Up next, Scott Ostler from the San Francisco Chronicle. He'll try to figure out how much tech is too much tech amid a huge sign-stealing scandal in baseball. This is the Future Sport Podcast. So let's take a minute here to thank our friends at 3Advance. These guys are ranked one of the nation's top app developers, but that's not all. They've helped grow a bunch of sports tech startups like Team Builder, T-Box Tour, and In-Game Fantasy, but they're also experts in user experience, cloud APIs, and artificial intelligence. So if you're looking for a dev partner to bring your future sport tech to life, look these guys up. Go to 3advance.com. They're the team to make it happen, and advance you will. That's the number 3advance.com, and tell them Future Sport sent you. Baseball's an old school game with a lot of modern technology, and they are converging in ways that have become very, very difficult, specifically in the offseason leading into this spring training. See the Houston Astros. Scott Ostler from the San Francisco Chronicle wrote a piece there where he said, baseball and technology, let's pull the plug. Hey, Scott, how are you?
I'm good, Bram. How are you?
I don't know that they can pull the plug, but what did you mean by it?
Well, I just think, first of all, I'm not anti-progress. I'm not anti-tech. I'm not anti-analytics or anything like that. But I think there's a certain point where too much of the stuff gets in the game. For instance, I'll just give you one example. There, as of like 4 or 5 years ago, teams are allowed to have tablets in the dugout and in the bullpens. And, you know, they can look at you're in the bullpen and you're about ready to come in. You can look up your last 5 mound appearances against the hitters you're going to face and things like that. And same in the dugout, you can do similar things. And to me, that doesn't add anything to baseball, and it kind of takes away from baseball. It kind of takes away from the purity. And for instance, if a hitter, what happens a lot of times, the hitter will strike out, and he doesn't feel right, so he'll go back to the clubhouse in between innings or whatever, and look at the last at bat and look at a couple other bats and study video for 5-10 minutes or however long he can, and then come back. Well, while he's doing that, he's not on the dugout. He's not in the dugout rooting for his own team. He's not interacting with the players. He's not part of the game. He's just a lone guy back in the clubhouse studying video during a game. And to me, that doesn't it detracts from the game. And I just think that video has gone the tech stuff has gone too far in a lot of ways.
And obviously, listen, there's a huge backlash to what's going on with Houston and others. We haven't heard yet at the time of this taping. We don't know what the Red Sox situation is going to be. They clearly are not alone in all of this. Is that what kind of prompted your thoughts about tech, that we ran into a cheating scandal that is technologically oriented?
Yeah, probably so, although they certainly could have found other ways to cheat, and it's not super high tech. Although apparently they used a computer to break the signaling, break the code on other teams' signals and stuff like that. But one of the things that struck me is when AJ Hinch, I guess he found out about it, and he took a baseball bat he went back in the room where the video watcher sits during the game to see if they should call replays, ask for replays and stuff, and he busted the monitor with a baseball bat. And it struck me that whole idea of there's a room back there somewhere in the clubhouse or off the clubhouse where a designated coach usually sits and watches the whole game, and whenever there's a play that he thinks is challengeable, then he radios or calls out to the dugout and they challenge. And I think, why do they need that? If one team had that and the others didn't have that, then that one team would have an advantage. If none of the teams had that, then they would have to just use their own instincts and judgment from the dugout and say, hey, we think we should challenge that. To have that extra layer of technology is, to me, ludicrous and unnecessary. It's just, why do we need a guy? That's not part of baseball, traditional baseball.
Yeah.
As a guy sitting in the clubhouse watching TV and eating pizza. It's kind of crazy.
I will tell you, though, and I think you probably know this, you are yelling at the clouds a little bit because it's not going to change. The technology is not going to go away. I think the larger question is, what can baseball do to wrap their arms around it so there aren't unfair advantages?
Well, that's true. And I think there's probably limitations to what you can look up on your tablet, what you have in the dugout and the bullpen. I'm not sure who monitors that. So the more of that stuff you have, the more you leave yourselves open. You leave openings for cheating and fudging and all that stuff. And also, let's say it doesn't go any further. Let's say we continue to have the guy sitting in the clubhouse doing the evaluations and stuff like that. Okay, I guess I can live with that. There's nothing I can't fight City Hall and everything. But this stuff's not going to stop, in 3 or 4 or 5 years, because there are certain people on teams that love technology. It's going to be a case where I'm batting and I've got a 3-2 count against Madison Bumgarner, and I call time and walk over to the dugout and ask them how he usually pitches me in 3-2 counts with runners on second and third, and then then Madison calls timeout and goes has somebody come out and tell him how he best should pitch me 3-2 with runners in second, third with 2 outs, and so on. It's just there doesn't seem to be any end to the technology because a lot of people love technology. I'm not sure the players do, but
I'm afraid to ask you what you think of robotic umpires because they're coming too.
It's funny you asked that. I love them. I'm 1,000% in favor because that's one area of the game that it's just flawed, and it gets more and more flawed. The harder pitchers throw and the more stuff they throw, because it's just human beings can't see that little finite the corners and stuff like that. You can't judge it. The eye gets fooled, so it's impossible to call. And not only that, but it becomes more noticeable because we have all the technology, the TV replays, so we see when the umpires are wrong and when they're fallible and when they're going off in their own little tangents and stuff. So it just that's a part of the game that I think it would be so much simpler if we just knew a ball or a strike. And I don't know why people fight it, because to me there's the color of the game. There's so much color in the game, and I know sometimes the arguments with umpires are colorful and a lot of stuff. But the whining after every pitch, basically, that goes on in Major League Baseball, basically, every other pitch, the batter's stepping out and he's looking back and he's yapping at the umpire, and what's that? And the catcher's yapping at him. The dugouts are yapping at the umpire. Come on, call it both ways. No. To me, that's not colorful. That doesn't add much to baseball. That just adds more to the doubt of the competency of the umpires.
You can read Scott Ostler's work in the San Francisco Chronicle. Thanks so much for joining us, Scott.
You're welcome, Brandon.
That will do it for us this week. Remember, the future is now. This is the Future Sport Podcast. I'm Bram Weinstein. The Future Sport Podcast is brought to you by 3 Advance, developers of sports tech apps that are AI-powered and UX-focused. So if you're looking to create some apps for your startup or your sports biz calls for some artificial or business intelligence, you should check out 3 Advance. They're incredible. Go to 3advance.com. That's the number 3advance.com.